Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to my channel, or if you are a returning viewer, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to discuss, configure, and demonstrate policy groups in Cisco's Catalyst SD-WAN, specifically how they relate to application priority, or what you may also refer to as app-aware routing. Now, I will be using Cisco Modeling Labs version 2.10 along with Catalyst SD-WAN controllers, which are running 20.16.1, as well as the Catalyst 8000 virtual routers, which are running 17.16.01a. Now, I will provide all that information in the description of the video for your reference. So all that being said, let me share my screen and we'll get right into it here. Okay, so this is the official Cisco documentation that discusses the constructs and building blocks of how to accomplish what we're going to go through today. Now, this is a lengthy document. I will not be going through the entire thing, but I would encourage you to at least familiarize yourself with it, or definitely read through it so you can get an understanding of how to accomplish some of the tasks or some of the challenges you might face. So I do want to point out they have a little sample topology here, which in their case, they have two sites that have an MPLS and a business class internet. So that's kind of the basic constructs on how to be able to do path or traffic manipulation based on path performance. Now I'm going to hop over to my lab. So this is part of a larger topology. So if I zoom out, you can kind of see there's quite a bit going on here. But we're going to just zoom in and we're going to kind of focus in on what we see as San Jose or SJC and Research Triangle Park or RTP. So in my case, very similar to what the documentation has, these two locations have a single router which have dual internet connections. In my case, I'm going to simulate business internet and public internet between the two locations. And then there's just a Catalyst 9 kV switch that hangs off the router, which provides some, end user connectivity at that location. So again, very simple topology here, but enough to kind of demonstrate what it is we're looking at. Now, I do want to highlight something here. So this desktop inside of San Jose, this is essentially like a little Linux box that we should be able to open a web browser and get to, websites or URLs. And then in RTP, this external connector that I have configured here is actually providing connectivity to a Microsoft Windows server that's running IIS that is hosting a website. So if I bring up the VNC to this machine just to kind of demonstrate really quickly and log in, if I go to, I'll just kind of bring it up from scratch here. If I go open a web browser and I point the web browser to 10.4.10.100, which is a host running over in the other location, you can see that it's just hosting this very simple website just to give connectivity here. Okay, and now I will be showing you kind of a better way to simulate that. You don't need to go through and build all this stuff inside of a lab. The Catalyst SD-WAN Manager does offer some pretty cool simulation flows that we can rely on to kind of mimic what I have built here. So I just wanted to highlight that and just emphasize that you don't need to go to this extreme when you do your labs. All right. Okay, so heading over to SD-WAN Manager, we're going to be spending the majority of our time in two different places within in Manager. We're going to be in the Monitor Devices section. So if I take you there quickly, these are all the devices that are registered to my SD-WAN fabric at the moment. I'm specifically interested in the SJC router. And when I click on the router, if I scroll all the way down under security monitoring, under system status here, there is essentially a troubleshooting page. So I'm going to click on troubleshooting, and we're interested in this simulate flows in the center. So if I click simulate flows, it brings up this tool that I can now use to essentially do what we just looked at from the CML lab, where I opened up a web page on the Linux box and navigate it to 10.4.10.100 to bring up that IIS website. We're going to basically simulate that same flow, but we're going to do it straight from SD-WAN Manager. So as you can see, HTTP. All right. So basically I'm saying the VPN 103, which is the only VPN I have configured, it brings up the interface in which that IP is assigned to. That's the source IP defined on the router. This is the IIS web server. And obviously I'm going to specify HTTP. Under advanced, I just want to show all paths, all tunnel paths that I have available to route between SJC and RTP. And you can see based on the simulation that there's 4 different potential paths in and out of these 2 branch locations. Now there's only 2 circuits, but when each location has 2 circuits, it provides 4 separate paths: biz to pub to pub, biz to biz, and pub to biz. So let's just say, for the sake of this demonstration, we're going to pretend that the business internet is a better performing circuit. Maybe it's fiber, maybe it's got more throughput, whatever the case might be. We're going to just deem that the biz internet is more reliable, and we want to point certain traffic over it as opposed to the public internet. So how do we do that? If we go back to, this is the second spot in the graphical interface that we're going to spend our time. So if we go to configuration and policy groups, we're going to be defining a policy for application priority and SLA. So you can see when I click here, I don't have anything built, nor do I have anything assigned in the way of application priority to the main policy group. See, there's nothing here. I can't select anything because we didn't build it yet. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to change that. Now, before I say add, I want to show you the group of interest. So if I click on group of interest, these are essentially all the Lego building blocks that we can define or use or reference within the policy. Okay, and as we go through the workflow together in the next few minutes, if we were to come back to this group of interest page, we should start to see some things populate based on what we input. So I can tell you what we're going to do is we're going to use a data prefix as an example to match traffic from source to destination. So as we build those prefixes, they're going to start to appear here. For the preferred color group, we're going to start to see that, our color groups are going to appear here as we define those parameters inside the policy. So let's go ahead and say add application priority and SLA. We're just going to give it a name. We're going to call it AAR for App Aware Routing Demo, and we're going to hit create. So it immediately creates it, and it takes me into this, I'll call it a workflow, right? And you can see it could be a little overwhelming at first if you've never done this, but what it's trying to do is essentially provide us with somewhat of a template or like a guideline on how, we can go about doing this. We're not going to use this because for purposes of this demonstration, it's just going to make it a little bit more convoluted and confusing. So I want to try to keep this simple. And by the time I'm done doing it the advanced way, which is up here, I think it'll make more sense. And then you can kind of graduate into this model if you want to use it. But basically if I were to expand these and you look at the queues, this will, at the end of the day, if we were to do it this way, it would give you an 8-class QoS model, which isn't necessarily applicable to all environments, but that's what it would do here. And then you can even, take care of your SIG and your DIA if you saw the need to do that. So again, we're not going to approach it this way. I'm going to hit the advanced layout and I'll show you the difference. Before I do that, I'm going to hit additional settings and I'm just going to turn on IPv4 for application visibility and IPv4 for flow visibility. I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to go to advanced. And when I hit advanced, notice all of that stuff goes away. So now it's more of a blank slate. So now it's up to us to define the parameters or the policies that we want to enforce. So we're going to go ahead and say add a policy. We're going to call it AAR SJC. Why not? Now for the VPN, I only have the VPN 103 as we saw in the monitor section. That's the only VPN that I'm routing between the sites. So really, in purposes of this demonstration, that's the only VPN that I'm going to be applying policy to. So I'm just going to select that, and these populate basically based off of what you have configured there. And for direction, I'm just going to say all, and we want to allow this traffic, not drop it. So that's all it takes there. I'm going to say add. Now, they're built the policy, but if we look in the policy, there's nothing there. So it's up to us to add the rules to do something, right? So I'm going to say add rules. And it's kind of like I said, it's kind of like a workflow. It just kind of walks you, guides you through it. So it's giving us sequence number 1, and it's saying rule number 1. So you can call it rule 1, or you can make it something more specific. So I'll call it SJC HTTP. I might not actually narrow this down to HTTP. I might just keep it even simpler than that, but that's fine for now. So now we have to tell it to match something. What are we going to match on? So if we click on match, we can see that we have a whole bunch of choices to choose from, right? So we can match on application or traffic class, which again, that's kind of the title of this video, if you will, like application aware routing. So you can certainly match on application, and you can pull it based off of what it provides. There's a whole laundry list of applications. You can even create a custom application and tie whatever it is you might be using. You could do it based on port number, whatever you think is a good fit for what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to actually go ahead, just to keep this very simple, I'm just going to say source data prefix, and I'm going to say destination data prefix. So you might argue this isn't technically app aware because I'm doing it with IP addresses, but the concept is exactly the same. So for source, out of the box, it gives you the RFC 1918. Now, I don't want to match on all of those subnets. I just want to match on what SJC has configured. So if we go back to the topology, we're only talking about 10300/16. So I'm just going to give it a name. And then for the actual subnet, I'm literally just going to type it in as you would inside of a router, switch, or whatever, right? So there's my /16. I'm going to go ahead and save it. So now I can select that as an option for my source, which is great. For data, for destination, I'm going to do the same exact thing, except I'm going to get a little bit more granular. So if we come back to the topology, that website is running on the IP address 10.4.10.100. So I can even get as granular as a /32, right? So that's what we'll do. 10.4.10.100/32. We'll save that. So now we're saying anything coming from 10300/16 destined for 10.4.10.100. Go ahead and match that. Now, once we match it, we need to do something with it, right? So we need to add an action. Notice when I add action, it's only giving me counter and log. That's because it's defaulted to base action drop. So go ahead and change the action to accept. Click on add action, and you'll see a lot more options appear. So what we want to do is we want to change the preferred color group. Okay, so we can even change the remote color group as well. So let's go ahead and check both of these and see what it wants from us. So it's asking us what's the color group you want to prefer. So in other words, what's the transport that you want to use? So I'm going to say, give it a name. I'm going to say biz preferred. I want to prefer the business internet. So when you hit the drop down for color preference, this is everything within SD-WAN. It'll give you all the privates, the customs, everything that is a possibility for the color. In our case, again, it's biz internet. And then for secondary path preference, I want to say direct path. And then for the secondary color, we'll say pub for public internet. And we'll say direct path. All right. So we'll go ahead and save that. So now we're saying, okay, once you do your match, sorry, there's an application list that I need to I missed here. Let me go back. So we'll say AAR SJC for the application. Actually, I want to let me get rid of this. I don't want that for now. Let's just leave it as source and data. Again, I want to keep this very simple. I know I called it HTTP. But yeah, we'll just leave it as source and destination right now. It's fine. We can grow into the port 80. So we define the color group as biz preferred. Now it's asking us what's the remote color. So when it arrives in RTP, what should it come in on? We'll just say biz internet. So do biz to biz. All right. Let's go ahead and save that. So it takes us back to the overall workflow. You can see now that we have a rule inside the policy. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to save that. It's actually behind me. So in the bottom right, I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. And now there's one more piece or two more pieces to this puzzle. We have to attach that, essentially that rule set that we just created to the overall policy. So if I come back to here, I just select AAR demo under application priority and I can save that. And then I should be good to deploy. So we're just going to go ahead and deploy it to both routers. That's fine. This is the policy that I had created already. It was from a previous YouTube video where I demonstrated the secure services edge. So this is just a remnant of that video. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy. And we can watch that status as it goes. We should see the controller hit success first, and then the router should follow shortly after. Could take 20, 30 seconds, depending on your lab resources or your environment. Okay, so we have success on both routers. So now if we go right back to that monitor device page and we navigate back to San Jose, we're going to go to that troubleshooting page that I started off with. And we're going to run that same simulate flows for the same exact parameters. And this time, I would expect to see something different. So these are the same exact parameters we had last time. I'm going to hit simulate. Okay, and notice the difference here. So now you can see that the only path, even though I have all paths selected, it's only presenting me biz to biz, which is exactly what the policy was defined to do, right? Now, that's wonderful. That's great. We just took traffic from that 10.3 subnet to the 10.4 and we drove it over the biz internet. That's fantastic. But what if the biz internet starts to degrade, right? What if we start to have connection issues? We don't want to black hole traffic. We want to make sure that we act upon, a brownout or a degradation at some point. We want to move that traffic over based on some SLA criteria. So what does that look like? We come back to configuration policy groups. And we're literally going to go right back into the policy we created together. And under that rule, we're going to add another action. All right. So we're going to click add action again. And we're going to define an SLA class. So if we scroll down, what does it want from us for the SLA class? So if I hit the drop down for class, there's nothing there. Let's go ahead and create a new one. So we'll call it SJC Biz SLA, right? Just give it a name. And we're going to set some parameters here, right? We're going to say that we're willing to tolerate 5% packet loss, 250 milliseconds of latency. Actually, that's probably a lot, right? That's fine. And then we'll just say like 300 milliseconds of jitter, right? So it's an awful lot, but it's fine. And then we're going to say fall back to the best tunnel. This criteria can fall back based on the criteria of just a single, just loss. It can fall back based on just latency, just jitter. Again, this is up to you to define from a networking standpoint, what you think is the best fit, right? So, I mean, I'll just do all three in the order in which they're listed: loss, latency, jitter. All right. And we'll go ahead and say this is the variance. So, in the documentation that I kind of alluded to in the beginning, if you search for variance, they spell out how it's kind of treated, how it's defined, and how it operates under the degradation of the circuits. I'm not going to try to explain it. It can be a bit confusing when you read it for the first time. I'm just going to put in some values here, and we're going to hit save. Okay. So so we created the SLA class list. The preferred color is biz. When the SLA is not met, we want to fall back to the best path. All right. For the remote color, we'll still say that this is going to be biz. And we'll go ahead and save that. So now you can see when it brings me back to the overall policy, you can see my rule got considerably larger, right? So there's more parameters. We set all that stuff as far as the SLA. And you can see on the far right, you now see that we have an SLA class showing up here with the tolerance levels of what we defined. So I'm going to hit save down in the bottom right. It's just beyond my video here. And we'll go ahead and just deploy that for good measure. Deploy. Now, while that's deploying, I'm going to go over to the CML lab. And if I click on this link here, this is gig 1, which is actually the biz internet for SJC. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce some loss, latency, and jitter, right? So probably going to introduce too much, but that's fine. It's a lab. We'll enable that and we'll apply it. So you can see the little black icon on top of the link. That means that we've now introduced degradation to that link. So if we come back to SD-WAN Manager, it looks like our deployment has been successful. We come back to Monitor Devices, and we go right back to SJC. Before I go into the troubleshooting page, I'm going to show you one other section under Monitor where you can get a glimpse of how your circuits are essentially performing, okay? So if you go down about halfway, you'll see WAN and then T-lock. So I'm going to click on T-lock. Okay, so now that the page loads, what we see here is essentially over the course of the last hour, we can see that if we hover our mouse over the data point, we can see the biz internet packet loss percentage has essentially skyrocketed, right? Based on the CML injection of the degradation. Now this chart option is showing us loss. We can look at latency and jitter as well, right? And we can see the measurements there as well, right? But the point being now is if we go to troubleshooting, we go to simulate flows. Okay, so what we see now is we can notice it's public internet to biz internet. Okay, so it did exactly what we wanted it to do. So it recognized based on the SLA class that we defined in our policy, it breached the threshold of how much packet loss, latency, and jitter it was willing to tolerate. And it went ahead and it moved that traffic over to the public internet because it's performing optimally, right? So that's the whole idea of app-aware routing. Now, I know I demonstrated it with IP address-based formatting, but Again, you can do it based on all of the parameters we looked at together, which, by the way, we should probably go back and look at the group of interest now that we have it configured, right? So if we come back here and we go to, let's say, data prefix, see now, notice we have the 10.3 and the 10.4, which we defined as part of the workflow. But this is where you would come back and potentially manipulate as needed, right? So I just wanted to point that out. Same thing with preferred color group. Here's our biz preferred. We can actually go ahead and we can edit the parameters as well, right? And then the SLA class is where we defined the thresholds there. So again, very simple way of looking at application aware routing and in the way of policy groups and how you configure, test, and kind of visualize what your policies look like inside of SD-WAN Manager. So I hope this has been informative. Thanks for viewing. Thanks for your time. Take care.